Okay, moving into chapter 3. Emma, wake up, little one. It's time for your writing lessons. Emma blinked, opening her eyes just not to see the pale light coming in. Opening her eyes just not to see the pale light coming in through her blinkered windows. For a moment, she didn't know where she was. Regina's house, right? She'd gone there because something about Scott. Who was Scott? Then the Queen was there, throwing the shutters open and letting the morning light in. The best way to start the day is bright and early, Emma. Come, you've already missed breakfast. I trusted you to wake yourself up. Now Emma remembered. She was in the palace, the ward of Queen Regina, who had promised just yesterday to finally teach her how to ride. Whoever Scott was, he must have been a dream she'd been having. The Queen was already dressed for the day in a riding habit, exquisitely tailored as always. A sun hat started off her ensemble, black roses in the brim, with a red jacket curving around her figure and tight leather pants daringly caressing her legs. As modest as the jacket was, with an impish bow over the chemisette-covered cleavage, the trousers highlighted the very athleticism she'd been showing during their lessons. Regina never liked relying on any one of her many perfections, preferring to dazzle her court with a new one every day. It was one of many pieces of advice she'd given to Emma over the years. The Queen presented Emma with an apple. Eat. I know it's not much. I'm not hungry, Emma assured her. How could she be when she was so excited? Her own horse, at last. We'll make up for it at lunch, the Queen promised her. We'll have worked up a healthy appetite by then. Emma almost wolfishly devoured her apples. Apples? I thought there was one. Okay, but apparently she devoured multiple, because it says apples. The juice running down her chin and into the silk of her nightgown. Regina watched fondly as it dripped to her breasts. You make me remember being young, with a young woman's appetites. Come, let's get you out of those rags and into something more suitable. The Queen had brought Emma her own riding clothes. Not as stylish as Regina's, but practical and well suited for a beginner. Breeches, a brief jacket, a silk shirt that felt astonishing against Emma's skin, and a jockey cap, all of it enchanted to protect Emma if she fell. Well, that's handy. I wish I'd had that back when I was riding. I probably wouldn't have a messed up spine now if I had. They hurried down the castle halls, Regina at her own grand pace, Emma practically straining at the leash. You know, if she's at her own grand pace, wouldn't that be kind of slow, not hurrying? Anyway, Emma was practically straining at the leash, burning her excitement in questions. What's my horse's name? Is it a thoroughbred? What color is he? Is it a he? I don't know that they would have thoroughbreds in the Enchanted Forest. Okay, whatever. You'll see, the Queen promised her, pinching her cheek. Tact, girl. We walk amongst men. Okay. Right. Emma matched steps with the Queen. I'm a lady. I'm a right proper lady. Ladies don't mutter, the Queen chided gently. Finally, they were out in the open air, walking on the tall grass outside the castle to the stables. It was a market day, with all trade suspended so families could be together and merchants could render their week's taxation to the Queen. I don't think that's how market days work, because generally they want to sell stuff on market days. But okay. It was so quiet, it seemed as if the castle itself were deserted, and there certainly wasn't anyone outside the walls, not with the war on. The stables were a brisk walk, the kind of distance Emma and her Queen traveled all the time in their evening and morning strolls. All the fresh air seemed to be going straight to her heart, puffing it up until it threatened to burst out of her chest. Regina took her hand, as ladies do, and stroked her forearms soothingly. Young women's appetites, the Queen repeated. With age, you learn to savor your pleasures. Enjoy the hunt as much as the kill. You're not excited? Once I learn to ride, we can race and travel whenever we want, or wherever we want, without carriages. If we wanted, we could ride all the way to Balmore without anyone being the wiser. We could be alone all day, sipping wine like careless people. You tempt me so, my little devil, the queen sighed. I really just can't imagine Regina talking like this, even when she was the evil queen. Anyway. I say anyway a lot, don't I? You tempt me so, my little devil, the queen sighed. Wouldn't it be wonderful if we could just spend the day in each other's company, you resting your head in my lap? My legs sore from a long day's ride, Emma hinted. You can indulge your appetite soon. We're here. As always, when the queen had an appointment, the stable boys had mucked out the stables and further cleansed it with magic before leaving, ensuring it smelled of roses. If you're a horse lover, you want your stable to smell like horses, not roses. Anyway, each stall had been emptied, leaving only one nattering prospect. Okay. Oh, I guess they only left one horse in. That's what it's saying. Emma gasped aloud when she saw it. Tall, sleek, and black, yet only a pony, its dimensions making it seem slender, almost brittle. Wait, she gave an adult person a pony? I don't know if this person's using pony in the correct manner. Well, I know it could be like a halflinger. Anyways, but it was slender, so maybe it's sort of an Arab-type horse? Or, yeah. But she knew that if the queen had picked it out for her, it would be fast as the dickens. Such a thing could almost have been one of the queen's many beautiful ensembles, dark and stylish, not to be underestimated. I love it! Emma screamed. I'm sorry, there's an exclamation point. And she screamed it. Love at first sight, the queen mused, a finger trailing down Emma's back between her shoulder blades to feel the pitter-patter of her heart at work. I know what that's like, ever since I first saw you. Emma smiled widely, not sure how to accept the compliment, looking away at first, then meeting the queen's eyes to show her how pleased the words had left her. After her parents had died in the war, it was pure chance that she'd wandered upon Regina as the queen toured the devastation. Since then, Emma had lived in the palace with Regina, almost a symbol of the kingdom itself, a sign that no matter what damage the enemy rained down on them, they would survive and prosper. What do you want to name him? Regina asked, giving Emma a subtle push to greet the animal. Emma walked up to the horse, which stared at her as placidly as a newborn kitten. She reached her hand out, and the horse butted its head against it, eagerly letting Emma rub its mane. I don't know. What do you call something that you just want to ride all day? Graham? The queen submitted. Which one of them is riding Graham all day? That's what I want to know. No. Yes, you're right. That's more a name for a dumb beast. Our little lady is clearly smart. To be kept protected and concealed from prying eyes, but brought out often for our enjoyment. How about Belle? That's so horrible. Poor Belle. Belle, Emma nodded. I like it. So does she, I think, the queen said, watching as Belle tossed her mane. Well, every Belle I've ever known has been fond of beasts. Perhaps your horse equally enjoys being one. Ow. With a little help from Regina, Emma saddled her new pet. The saddle was shiny new leather with a monogram on the pommel. Emma noticed it as she was double-checking the straps. A stylized P. She ran her fingers over it. I thought you had this saddle made especially for me, she asked. Why doesn't it have my name on it? Not your name, your title, the queen tapped the monogram. The nobles may not see it this way, not yet, but as far as I'm concerned, you are my princess. Too overcome to speak, Emma simply hugged the queen. A moment later, she felt the queen's gloves patting her on the back. Such an affectionate girl, my silly little princess. Come, let's get you saddled, or there'll be no time for riding. You can hug me as much as you want back in your room. Oh, this just leaves like a horrible feeling. Ugh. Emma backed off, still with the stupid grin on her face. She didn't know how she could ever repay her queen, but she knew she'd find a way. I know how you'll be repaying your queen. I think we all do. Here, Regina said, casually lacing her hands together and presenting them for Emma to use as a makeshift stirrup. Let's get you mounted. Oh, that's a loaded term, too. You don't want me to use the stirrups? Really? Yeah, Emma, you know nothing about riding, apparently. You don't want me to use the stirrups? Emma asked, as close as they were, queen and princess. Emma thought, for the queen to offer her hands for someone, a commoner, really, to use as a stepping stone. There'll be enough time for you to use the stirrups when you've had a little more practice. For now, you don't want to take any chances, not with royalty, the queen teased. Emma laughed and obeyed, like she always ended up doing. Putting her boot in Regina's hands, Emma mounted Belle with a smooth, graceful motion. She'd imagined herself doing it so many times that it was like she'd been training for it. But she never could have imagined she'd be so high up. I thought it was a pony. Does this person, not know that ponies are small and not tall? The ground seemed like another country. And how could a pony's back be so thick? It's probably a halflinger. But they're still not tall. Her knees were spread so wide that Emma worried the queen would have a princess whose legs were permanently open by the end of the day. I don't think she's going to complain about that either, but that's also not how things work. Thank you, your highness. Thank you, thank you, thank you. You can thank me later, the queen said, surprising Emma by how far away she was. Along the wall of the stables, picking out a riding crop. She decided on one that was decidedly long, almost threateningly so. Well, then it's probably not a crop, it's probably a dressage whip. Walked back to Emma, thumping its intimidating length into her open palm. Even that looked like it hurt. It doesn't really hurt. Not that much. Now, I don't want your horse taking one step until we've covered the basics. Emma was disinclined to argue when the queen had a virtual weapon in her hands. First, the queen showed her how to hold the reins. Loose, but not too loose. Obviously, if you pulled the reins one way, Belle turned one way, and another. It was like listening to one of her boorish tutors go on about arithmetic. But the queen seemed happy with their progress. She gave Belle some sugar cubes out of the palm of her hand. Don't I get any sugar? Emma asked teasingly. Why? Belle's doing all the work. Regina brushed her empty hands off, and for good measure gave Belle a little kiss on the crown. Emma screwed up her face in a parody of jealousy. And that's almost all there is to it, Regina concluded, stepping back. All that's left is getting used to the riding itself, the feel of it, having such a strong-willed creature completely obedient to one's whim. It's a very pleasurable sensation, isn't it, Emma? Emma flushed in embarrassment. Did Regina know? It meant nothing, but all the fresh air and the sunshiny day, and getting to spend time with the queen, not sharing her with boring courtiers and diplomats, plus Belle, of course, the feel of her breathing under Emma, heart pounding, blood rushing, muscles contracting. I thought she wasn't moving yet. Why are her muscles contracting? It was, exciting, Emma. She could feel the wonderful leather of the saddle right through her riding breeches, and the pommel of the saddle just fit so snugly between her legs, and her body jogging up and down with each step. It was just her body acting up, right? No. She hadn't told Regina for fear that she'd make Emma stop riding, but if she did, surely the queen would tell her that was all it was, that it happened to everyone, that it had happened to her. She would get used to the feel, grow bored with the stimuli, and that would be that. Obviously, she wanted it to end. Obviously. You have to make your horse trust you, Regina continued, smiling at Emma as she led Belle around by the halter. She doesn't have a bridle on it? I mean, maybe she has a halter and a bridle. But it had reins, so maybe it's both. She led her around by the halter, walking them in circles around the corral. And you have to show her you're in control. You don't really have to show horses that you're in control unless they're not very well trained, or they're just really, really stubborn. But, I mean, most of the time they just know. You have to show her you're in control. Sometimes that means disciplining her. No, it really doesn't. Do you think you can do that? Sure, Emma said, eyeing the riding crop the queen still toted. For some reason, the sight of it was making the throbbing in her crotch get better. Worse! If I have to... It was a little phallic, and the Queen was gripping it so surely. The Queen casually ran her thumb over the handle of the crop. Emma imagined her holding a man's manhood like that, rubbing it. Why is she imagining that from a riding crop? Of all the things that you could imagine with a riding crop, it's not exactly where my mind would go, and I'm a perv. Or perhaps, yes, a woman's thigh. Fingers splayed on the outer curve, thumb just touching the inside, just stroking it. This was mortifying. She needed a distraction. You said that's almost all there is to it. What else is there? Oh, a million little things. Nothing you need to worry about now. You know, if somebody told me that, I think I'd start worrying. I'm a fast learner, Emma said challengingly. You certainly are. A pity your tutors don't seem to agree. Emma bit her lip. I can do better. I trust you will. A princess should be both obedient and strong, like the throne she sits in, giving support at the end of a long day, but also being just hard enough to foster strength, backbone, not like a pillow, full of nothing but goose down, good only for being soft. You're not a pillow princess, are you, Emma? Oh, that's not what that term means either. I mean, Emma wouldn't know what it meant, like, actually. Emma shook her hand fervently. I think he means she shook her head fervently. I don't know, maybe she reached out and shook her hand. Good. Now the way you've been riding so far is called the sitting trot. It's fine for day-to-day riding and dressage. Dressage. Emma could have laughed. If she wanted to go to all that effort to learn to prance around, she'd join ballet. You know, dressage is actually pretty damn fun. Just saying. But for hunting and jumping, that was more like it. There's what's called the riding trot. With each, well, actually, if you're going over jumps, you're not really, you're holding yourself up. You're not really posting. With each stride Belle takes, you move up and down with her like you're breathing her air for her. It's not quite how I would describe it, but okay. Rising with the inhale and lowering with the exhale. Quick, hurried breaths like you're making passionate love. I've never, well, no. Let's see, let's ponder that for a second. In my experience, well, only sort of. I would have said the sitting trot was a little bit more like that. Like I was making passionate love. Anyway, Emma giggled, even as her sex gave a twinge. I wouldn't know. That's another lesson. The Queen brought her riding crop to Emma's thigh, moving it along the outside of her knee. Are your feet firmly in the stirrups? Yes, Your Highness, very firm. Good girl. Push yourself up and down in the saddle. Use the stirrups. Actually, you should be using your knees. Emma did, bouncing. Oh, don't bounce in the saddle. That won't make the horse very happy. For a moment, she was worried it would be boring, more of being walked around the corral by Regina, not getting to ride at all. But then her crotch came down against the saddle. The leather was so cool, and her sex was pleasantly warm, like she'd been lying bare in the sun, and its rays had caressed her to the fullest. The contrast was awe-inspiring, like going into the cool, dark confines of the castle after a long day outside, boiling with sweat. Her body was maddeningly sensitive, thighs and bottom conspiring with her womanhood to flood her with pleasure. You know, I never experienced this in all of the years that I rode horses. I guess I missed out. I'm sad about that. Every time her body gently slapped against the hard saddle, she felt herself tremble, all over, with a lingering in her groin that carried her to the next sit, building on itself, throbbing and moistening. On the third sit, Emma gasped. Are you all right? The Queen asked. Her voice should have brought Emma back to reality, embarrassed her the way it had when Regina called her when she was exploring herself in the bath, but not this time. Something about the Queen's voice made her feel even more safe, more free to enjoy herself. It was like she'd internalized her earlier thought about Regina having done this same thing when she was learning to ride. The image occurred to Regina again the image occurred to Emma again and again. If you're getting tired, we can stop. No, I can do this all night. Or all day, as the case may be, the queen smiled graciously. Ready for more? Oh, yes, yes. Willing and obedient, I chose wisely. You chose wisely. Sorry, having flashbacks. It took a moment for Emma to realize she meant the horse. She didn't mean the horse, Emma. Now push yourself back, then forward. That's posting. It frees the horse's back when you ride, so Belle really enjoys it. I don't think the horse gives a shit. Unless you're bouncing on her, then she'll give a shit. She won't like it. It just helps you ride easier. So do I, Emma thought, almost laughing at her own naughtiness. And why not? The queen would never know. It would be her little secret. Emma sat quaking astride Belle at the conclusion of each sit, grabbing bare moments to enjoy herself. The more she did it, the better she felt. The longer she spent at the end of each sit. She kept her mouth shut, but sounds came from deep within her chest. A long, contented purr as she threw herself against the saddle and swayed, her breasts now jiggling with the force of her action. Okay, dude. Really. Calm your jets. She closed her eyes so the only thing she'd experience would be what she felt, and the queen's voice. Without the burden of sight... Without the burden of sight, your horse is going to walk right into a fence. Seriously. You know, I had it happen. Because they can't see in front of them. She could, without the burden of her sight, she could feel her own hair swishing across her face. Her sex was seeping. You might want to see a doctor about that. She hadn't known it could get that wet. Soon the leather would be saturated. Wow, the grooms are going to really love cleaning your tack after you're done, Emma. Yikes. That's enough, Emma. Emma, that is quite enough. Rolling her eyes, the queen raised her riding crop and brought it down against Emma's leg. That'll smart a little bit. Emma's eyes popped open. She looked at Regina, filling up with guilt, as the queen put her hands on her hips. You're expected to move with the horse, Emma, while it's going at a trot. You can't just post whenever you feel like it. You have to keep it going. Now start again. You kind of don't have a choice in keeping it going because the rhythm keeps you, unless you sit, which I find that posting is a lot easier. That's why we do it, at least on an English saddle. Now start again. This time I want to see you going much faster. Don't get lazy. Emma nodded, unable to speak. The sudden pain had pushed her orgasm away, but it had also made the sensation in her groin sharper and more intense. Now she felt herself heating up again as she thrust herself up and down, as she ground herself back and forth across the saddle. She was headed for her climax even faster now. It was going to be much better than she thought. Up, down, back, forth, the queen said approvingly, nodding with each motion Emma made. Her riding crop ticking against her palm with every repetition. Keep going. Faster. Faster. If you keep going any faster, you're going to start cantering, and then you won't be posting at all. Belle picked up on Emma's animalistic activity. Her hooves pawed the earth, soft neighs stirring from her mouth. This dude just does not know horses. It just made Emma feel more primal, more of a beast. Oh, she's the beast now, apparently. She rocked on Belle's back, overheated from her dry mouth to her flooding pussy. She felt lightheaded and almost dizzy. So, basically, Emma's probably having this dream while Regina's raping her, right? Because that's kind of what it seems like. Faster, the queen ordered, the riding crop coming down harder on her open palm. Faster, Emma! Yes, ma'am, Emma obeyed, grabbing hold of the saddle horn. Saddle horn? Why is she posting on a saddle with a horn? This dude really doesn't know horses. Grabbing hold of the saddle horn. Wow, that would actually hurt if this saddle had a horn. To keep herself roughly in place as she slid her pussy across the saddle. Her blue eyes were becoming glassy. She could barely keep them open at all. Didn't Emma have green eyes? I guess he decided that there were blue in this. So how do you like riding so far? The queen asked. asked Crop, relentlessly keeping time. Are you having fun? Uh-huh. Emma was squirming with each moment she spent in the saddle. It was becoming almost impossible to keep her balance, but she wouldn't dare stop for long enough to adjust herself. Her nipples alone were so hard they could almost be seen through her jacket. Wow, that's impressive, or it's a super thin jacket. So much fun! Belle bucked, and Emma almost fell. Too bad she didn't fall. Belle bucked, and Emma almost fell from her. She barely noticed. I don't know, I think I would notice. She held on tighter, fingers white-knuckling on the horn, and legs squeezing the horse's flanks like a lover. I'm glad. You know how important it is to me, that you're happy. Emma almost couldn't hear the Queen over the sound of the riding crop thwacking again and again and again. It seemed more important somehow, like its sound was flying straight to her cunt. So fucking happy, Emma breathed, shaking. Her hips wiggled with each little snap. Her ass clenched. The saddle was turning warm with her cream, swishing with each sit. Oh, that's bad. She could hear how close she was. What was that? The Queen asked. Her crop came down hard enough it seemed to draw blood. What was what? Emma moaned before she practically dove on the saddle horn. It struck her clit like Regina's own riding crop, and she stopped being able to say anything at all. It sounded like you said fucking, the Queen growled. The words sounded so goddamn good coming from her, dripping with sin and pleasure. Not dirty at all. No, not at all. Why would you think that? Wonderful. Being fucked. Fucking someone. Having a fuck. Emma's hips moved faster, unknowingly following the rhythm of the Queen's crop, like a mouse after the Pied Piper. Did you use that word? The Queen persisted. Now her crop struck her hand hard enough to bruise with each use of that beautiful word. Fuck? Unconsciously, Emma followed suit, grinding down every time the word was spoken and the crop struck, obedient as Pavlov's dog. I might. Come was the rest of the sentence, but Emma wasn't speaking. She was thinking out loud. Wow, that's impressive. If thought were the right word for a mind on fire with want and gratification. The Queen interpreted it as, I might have said fuck, or so she was polite enough to imply. Fuck is vulgar, common language. Do you think a princess is fucked? Do you think one fucks a queen? No, we make love. Or would you rather be fucked? Hard and fast, dirty and brutish. Fucked until it hurts. Fucked until you're sore. Fucked and fucked and fucked. Emma's thighs were fused to Belle's sides. Her cunt wrapped around the wet leather like... Ew. Her cunt wrapped around the wet leather like a vine. Her clit being thrust against the saddle horn like hammer and tongs. Belle kicked at the earth. Belle, I would toss her off and step on her if I was you. Belle kicked at the earth as Emma's frenzy spread to her. Emma had to clamp her legs down on the saddle to keep from falling. She did it so hard that the saddle horn almost entered her. Wow! Oh, pressing her breeches inside her cunt like one massive finger. No, you really don't want to fuck a saddle horn. That would hurt a lot. Just saying. It was like a candle setting her on fire. The flame roared in her cunt and raced up her spine and exploded behind her eyes, so bright she could see it. It hurt her eyes, her eyelids fluttered, but she couldn't block it out. She could only watch as a solid wave of purple descended on her, blotting out her vision and everything else. For a moment, she was hot as a furnace, then blissful coolness, the afterglow. I asked you a question, Emma, the riding crop had stilled. Do you want to get fucked? She felt so wet it was like she'd sat in a puddle. Maybe that was why the fire had gone out. Belatedly, she realized the entire crotch of her breeches were soaked. It was hidden by the saddle, not that she cared. Her orgasm had her dumb and dizzy. Knowing she was going to fall, but not caring, she swayed stupidly until she slipped from the saddle into Regina's waiting arms. Then they both lost their balance and fell to the ground, Emma landing atop the Queen's warm, welcoming body, and waking up back in bed. No, still in bed. Emma looked around. There wasn't much to see by the soft blue moonlight that filled the room like water, but it was obvious she wasn't in a castle. See, I told you it was a dream. She was in Regina's bedroom, having had one hell of a dream, and Regina was gone. Emma was alone. Not even her clothes for company. At some point in the night, they'd been switched for a nightgown that was downright lingerie. Emma wondered who had undressed her. Well, it was Ruby, duh! Who had undressed her as she slept, and then decided that was ridiculous. She must have changed clothes just before falling asleep and just forgotten about it. Then Emma felt a throb between her legs, because of course she did. She pulled the sheets back and saw, under her gown, her panties turning dark with the result of her wet dream. Why are they turning dark? Well, I guess just the wetness. They must be leaden like last time. And she thought that only happened to boys. And she thought she wasn't even damp. What a fucking way to find out otherwise. Emma shivered, remembering the dream Regina's thoughts on that word. The real Regina could never find out. Moving quickly in case Regina came back, Emma stripped off her wet, dripping panties and ran to the window, tossing them outside into the rose bushes. The perfect crime. Like nobody's gonna find them. Her nightgown was just long enough to keep her from Britneying. They turned Britney into a verb. So long as no one looked at its translucence too closely. But then there was no one in the house but girls. Regina! Emma pulled the window shut so hard it nearly broke. That was a voice. A woman's voice. She'd only heard it because she'd opened the window. It seemed to be coming from the other wing of the house, carried to her by a chance breeze. It sounded like someone was in pain. Moving to the door, uncomfortably aroused by the feel of cool air against her bare sex, Emma eased the knob around and cracked the door. There was no one in the hallway, but she heard another sound carrying. This one sharper. Dangerous somehow. "Hello?" Emma called softly, not that she was sure what the point of calling out to someone was when she was whispering. Just in case there was a really polite burglar out there with really good hearing, she supposed. She slipped out the door, her oversensitive pussy sending a twinge through her body. Fuck! Fuck, as Regina would put it. This was too much. "Regina, please," the voice again, the woman again. "Oh, please." It definitely sounded like she was in pain. Gathering her courage and trying to ignore the lingering heat between her legs, Emma crept through the house toward the woman calling Regina's name. Dun, dun, dun! Who wants to take bets on the woman is not crying out to Regina in pain? Or maybe it is pain. Maybe she's getting her groove on with someone and that whip that she had in the dream. So, that was quite a ride. This guy obviously has not ridden or shown horses or anything. And he definitely has some interesting ideas about what it's like to be a woman riding a horse. Because, yeah, man, I rode horses all through my formative years, including, like, puberty. And it was never like that. Like I said, if it was like that, I wouldn't have ever given it up. I would still be out there. But, so that's an interesting adventure from this story. And, yeah, so much. I want to facepalm so hard right now. It's just bad. So we will venture on to the woman screaming Regina's name on the next segment.